You know how to book flights and hotels. All you're missing is a tool to plan the travel experiences you'll have once you arrive. That's why you need Viator. Book guided tours, activities, excursions, and more in one place to make your trip truly unforgettable. Viator has over 300,000 travel experiences to choose from. Everything from simple tours to extreme adventures and all the niche, interesting stuff in between. So you can plan something that everyone you're traveling with will enjoy. Real traveler reviews give the inside scoop from people who've already been on the experiences you're considering. So you can plan with confidence. Free cancellation helps you plan for the unexpected. And 24/7 customer support means you can travel worry-free. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. Find travel experiences for you. Do more with Viator.
When you visit Arizona, time is measured in moments, not minutes. Like the moment you see the Grand Canyon for the first time. Visit a new state of mind. Learn more at hereyouareaz.com.
Hi there, and welcome to Comedy Album Book Club. I'm your host, Jason DeLine, and this is the podcast where we listen to an influential, loved, hated, or rarely heard comedy album, and a panel of comedians, actors, writers, or other comedy fans talk about it. I wanted to take a minute and thank all of our listeners, and we have some from all around the world. We've got quite a few from the United States, the United Kingdom, Canada, Germany, Australia, Sweden, Norway, Israel, and even quite a few in India. So hello, everybody, and thanks for listening. Today's album is John Mulaney's Kid Gorgeous, live at Radio City Music Hall. We recommend you listen to the album or watch the Netflix special of the same name before going any further into this episode. John Mulaney was born in Chicago in 1982. When he was 7 years old, he had the opportunity to audition for the role of Kevin in Home Alone, but his parents declined. In 2004, he graduated from the same school as his parents, Georgetown University, where he met fellow comedians Nick Kroll and Mike Birbiglia in the school's improv troupe. He spent 6 seasons as a writer at Saturday Night Live, having co-created the character of Stefan with Bill Hader, and became only the third writer to host the show without ever being a cast member. The other two were Conan O'Brien and Larry David. He's known for his detailed storytelling and confidence of a much older man. Kid Gorgeous is Mulaney's 4th comedy special, airing on Netflix in 2018. Today's album was chosen by Toronto comedian Courtney Gilmore. She's on the podcast today as our featured guest. Also joining us in the studio is our producer Matt Ardill, a self-professed comedy nerd, and stand-up comedian Ryan Dillon. Once again, welcome to Comedy Album Book Club. Ryan, you were just telling us that you have an album coming out. You recorded in April out in Newfoundland?
Yeah, I recorded in Newfoundland, and then it actually went horribly wrong.
How so?
The person I hired to do the audio it was a train wreck. The guy who claimed to be a audio guy was actually just a photographer, but we did it at the
it's like two completely different skill sets.
It was bad. Like, I listened to it and my girlfriend had to like calm me down in my room because I was like freaking out because it sounded like it was from an iPhone. Like, it was so bad. But we did it at the Second City in August at the John Candy Box Theater, and it went great. And it's coming out this month. It's called Violently Nice.
Did you change anything after the performance? I did.
Honestly, I listened to it and like. Honestly,
you thought it was perfect. You were in love with it.
I was thinking, my God, in my hometown, what a great sounding show I can't use. But no, honestly, I didn't change much. Like,
did you say hello Newfoundland in the Toronto one?
Yeah, no, I said hello John Candy, not Newfoundland. But no, I didn't change much. I was really happy with how it did there. And if anything, I thought the John Candy set, I'd argue, was the better one because when you go back home and people have seen you from before, they've, you hear a joke for the first time, it's so funny, and then when you hear it for the second time, you're like, oh yeah, I remember that joke.
Right.
And when I did the John Candy, I partnered with Ian Alice, who does Empire Comedy, and he used his resources to pull in a crowd, and a lot of them in the audience never seen me before, so they were hearing those jokes for the first time, and I'd argue that it was a blessing in disguise because awesome. I prefer the cut at John Candy.
It's funny though, it's sort of a double-edged sword, right? Because if you're doing something like an album for the first time, you want all the support of your friends and family and the
Yeah.
The people who you want in your corner, who will laugh and clap and all that. So you probably felt all that, but then you got over that.
Yeah.
And you were ready to just speak to strangers.
Yeah. And honestly, I know so many people in the city, like a lot of the Yuck Yucks crowd, when they do their album recordings, they'll do it like at like just like the Vancouver Yucks that they're not even, they've never only done twice in, but it's because they've never seen them before.
Right.
They're like, that's the crowd. Like, and it's like, that's really at the end of the day, it's just getting the best reaction. So yeah, it's definitely a blessing in disguise.
Cool, man. Congrats.
Yeah.
Can't wait to hear it.
Yeah. Thanks, bud.
And Courtney, you have a monthly show
Yeah.
called So Fresh and So Clean.
So Fresh and So Clean.
Tell us about that.
It's a monthly show at Comedy Bar. It's clean comedy, clean themed comedy. We're 3 years running now, so it's me and Noor Hadidi. We produce it, and it's pretty fun.
What's the idea behind? I mean, it seems obvious what it is, but you felt like there was an audience for it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're still, even after 3 years, we're still sort of like pulling in our audience. Like, we're trying to figure out, like, who is it? Is it moms? Is it is it churches? Is it, there's like so many different people who like appreciate clean comedy, but like, yeah, there just wasn't like a steady clean comedy show in Toronto before this one, and it's just a good place to like for comedians to workshop their showcase material, or if they're going to be on TV or corporate gigs and they can't swear and they want like a room where they can like exclusively perform to people who are expecting that, then it's just a cool.
Do you find that people? Do you have people on who don't do it normally, and it's sort of a challenge for them?
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a really good writing challenge. And the funny thing is, I find that there are, like in Toronto, we have not many people, I don't know if you would say, would like define themselves as a clean comic. I can't even think of anyone off the top of my head who like specifically, but the ones who come to mind as typically performing clean, they're the ones who slip up on the show, and the dirtiest comics kill with like their squeakiest material, which is really interesting, because I think they're really proving to themselves that they can do it, and they're just like putting the work in, and it's really cool to see.
Well, I've seen time and time again that you can get a laugh once in a while with a swear word being a punchline, but if you see it written, there's not really anything to it. It's sort of a cheat
it's really interesting, because there are some jokes even of mine where I feel like a good old fashioned swear word it needs it. Like, it's
you
a
can
good
swear
punch.
in the show, by the way, if you can use examples. This isn't a
Get it
clean
all
show.
out here.
And when people use it sparingly too, you really feel that punctuation.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's every other word, it sort of becomes just noise, right?
Yeah, it's a good writing challenge, if anything.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
I think it makes complete sense that the dirty comics who do squeaky clean do really well, because a lot of people think it's really easy to write dirty jokes, but it's really not.
It's
you have to be really smart, because you can go up and be like, I'm gross and whatever, and then like, people are gonna like you're gonna get the cheap laugh. But like some of the best joke writers in the city, in the country, I think, are considered dirty comics, because they have to be clever. They can't just go up and use the crutch that is being gross and dirty, but they have to actually write like Tyler Morrison is probably I consider one of the darkest, dirtier comics in the city in terms of like his he's very much like a roast comic, but like his joke writing is sharp. It's so
smart.
sharp and smart. So I could see him doing your show and being like super clean.
And that's the best part too, is because you don't have to be. You can be dark and clean. There's no like restrictions.
So what defines
on that.
clean then for the show?
Well, the thing is, we're always learning what the parameters are. Like, running this show has really opened my eyes to like how subjective it is. Like, some comics will be like, for sure have 5 to 7 minutes polished clean, and then you watch them and you're like, really? You thought that was? Yeah, that's interesting.
I mean, there's some great innuendo in G-rated sitcoms from the 80s too, right? So do you guys still embrace that? Or?
We have like some parameters that we set, because we do want to establish a theme, and we do want people to come knowing that it's a clean theme. Right. So we just say like no big swears, no fuck, no like explicit sexual content. Beyond that, if it's like TV appropriate, then that's pretty much what we do. But we're trying to get we're trying to get a little squeakier, just because comics love to be rebellious, and so we want to we want to kind of make sure they're not towing the line too much. But the thing is, like Ryan said, like there's joke writing is not easy in general. There's plenty of bad dirty comedy, and there's plenty of bad clean comedy. Really bad cringy clean jokes. Like, it's not like a moral superiority thing, that like clean is automatically better. It's just like, what can you do that's maybe challenging to you, or better for different audiences.
A lot of times laughter comes from people being uncomfortable, right?
Yeah.
So if you keep people comfortable, maybe they're not laughing as much.
Yeah.
Like, you know, when I think of clean comedy, I think of puns that make me want to pull my hair out. You know?
Right, yeah,
Like,
of course.
like, you know,
Yeah.
if someone says, what's your favorite clean joke? I can't think of one, but if someone says, what's your favorite joke? It might be clean.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just thinking in that
It's
way.
those
is
labels
sort
are so, because even if someone would be like, what's your favorite dirty joke? I'm like, oh, okay, you want some stupid dick limerick or something like that.
What is your favorite? Do you have a favorite dirty joke?
I probably
That's
do.
not
I
yours.
can't think of it off the top of my head. But
That's funny what you're saying about like it's sometimes the comedians will be on stage and like they'll be at the last joke and they'll do that like, so what do you guys want to hear? You want to hear a clean joke or a dirty joke or something? And everyone always goes, yeah, dirty. Like no one's ever been like clean or dirty. Like, oh, you're squeakiest, my good sir. My mother's here. Like it's just so weird.
A literary reference, please.
Yeah. I've read books. Prove it to me.
Do you have any jokes about Stilton?
Yeah.
Some good cheese, fine cheese jokes.
Yeah, that's really true.
I do love your show because it is good practice for showcases.
You always kill
have
it
to
at the
come
show
see
too.
it.
I love doing because
Yeah, it's
there's
really
also
fun.
for me though, like I would consider myself a cleaner guy.
Yeah.
But I've done your show and I went, that's not as, now that I think about it.
Yeah.
But it's just funny how that perspective of just
And we do get sometimes we get audiences that are a bit more reserved and conservative, and so you think that you're like going to kill with this joke, and it won't land as well. And I'm like, don't sabotage yourself to be rebellious, you know? Like you want to have a good set, we want you to have a good set, you know?
I also find your show a really good lesson in people looking for a product because like because like you said there are probably more conserved people and more reserved who want to experience comedy but they're not comfortable with dirty material but they go this is advertised to me as a consumer, this is going to be a clean show, so when you go and pay for that, so it is frustrating when you get the rebellious comic that's like, I'm going to do this and be like clever, and
Do you get a lot of people
totally.
going like, you know what I mean? Like, is that in a lot of people's sets? Like they're just trying to force the innuendo? Like,
Oh yeah, you mean people get really creative for sure. That could be really fun too.
Yeah,
but
totally fun.
You get the whole spectrum of people doing clean comedy. So it's
yeah,
fun.
I like the name of it too. Like there are so many shows out there these days where you don't know what it is. Like Change Purse, the show, the best show ever. Like, okay, if you say so.
I own a purse.
It's for you, Ryan. That show is for you. Well, that's great, guys. Cool. So yeah, these guys both have lots of things going on, and we're here today to talk about the album Kid Gorgeous live at Radio City Music Hall by John Mulaney. I think, Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, this is the most recent album we've done on the show.
Yes.
This is by far, I think,
nice.
probably by a good 10 years,
Yeah, I think
the newest show we've done.
Patton Oswalt, his Werewolves and Lollipops would be the second.
That was
and
early
was
2000.
That's a good one, too.
2000.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is like a year old, if that.
Not even.
Not even,
May of this
yeah.
year.
Yeah.
It dropped. Yeah. I'm not sure when it recorded.
It was last year. Well, they just won he just won an Emmy for
did,
it, so it's got to
yeah.
be within the past.
last 12 months.
A daytime Emmy, but still in it.
Daytime Emmy. Hey man, I'll take a daytime Emmy. I'll take a 3 o'clock in the morning.
Is
Emmy.
it a smaller statue, you think? Or,
The daytime.
yeah, the
It
daytime.
is chocolate.
Not as
It's
prestigious.
gold chocolate.
It's a keychain.
So Courtney, this was your pick.
I love this album so much.
Yeah,
I'm
tell us
so
why.
Excited. It's just it's like structurally genius to me. I just find it so brilliant. I've watched it like 56 times. I watched it today again just to like refresh. I probably by now know the variation of colors in the backdrop that are always changing. Like I just love it. I love his finesse. Like I think I'm very drawn to his style. Like just really good structured jokes and they're so not clean like clean comedy, but clean like like clean
Economical?
cut, like very like polished. Like
There's
just
no
like
fat on it.
There's no fat on it. Every word is there for a reason.
Yeah.
I listened to the album versus the special.
Yeah.
Right? And it's a lot of we did live at the Met with Robin Williams, and there's a ton of stuff that just doesn't work in the album. But in this, there's nothing cut.
Yeah.
Like it is beat for beat, second for second, the exact same as what you get on Netflix, and that just speaks to that. Like these are finely tuned jokes.
Yes.
Where he knows every beat, when it's going to land, and how to land that.
And it's fast. Like you never get bored, but it's well paced.
Yep.
And it's a nice length. It's like 60 minutes. It's I think the exact is 63 with the music on either side.
Yeah.
But I mean, an hour is a really nice length to me for a comedy album. And some people with their specials really wear out their welcome with a 90-minute, 2-hour. You just don't want to laugh that long.
It was like Old Guard would be like you listen to older albums and they'd be like 2 hours or an hour and a half, and you'd hear about like, you know, some people doing like long shows, but people would say like, well, we loved it, we were engaged, but like it's so funny. I feel like sometimes now with like the way we obtain and retain information now, like shorter videos and like clips and like stuff, that it's like the idea of like. And sometimes I know people can't even sit through an hour and a half show at Comedy Bar. And it's just like, so it's funny how like a 60 minutes, I also agree, is like a nice clean, like that's where you're like the money for me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're all agreed on that. You mentioned that you you mentioned the colors in the background. So, I'm just driving 2x4s.
Yeah. Oh, can we talk about just because? Well, okay, you made a good. I didn't listen. I haven't listened to I've only watched the special, and I really liked. And I've had this discussion because I have friends who are John Mulaney fans who don't think that this is his best special, and I know, right?
Oh,
and
wow,
I like having those conversations because it just proves like how varied people's tastes are. So it's not like you're wrong. It's just like it shocked me just because to me, I love it so much that I can't even register in my mind that I love New in Town and I like Comeback Kid and stuff. But this one was just like so flawless to me. But yeah, so at Radio City Music Hall, I was worried that venue would like swallow him a bit, but I really liked the cinematography. Even I was even tweeting while I was watching it for the first time. I was like, I can't believe I'm talking about the cinematography of a comedy special, but I like the way it panned across. I like the way it zeroed in on him and came out, and I like the backdrop and like everything about it. I liked
him. I mean, he surprised me in how much he owned that entire stage.
He just like prowled the stage.
Yeah, he really makes use of the entire width of that.
That's the most I've ever seen that
man
move.
That EpiPen. You know,
You see, like, I don't know if you watched Aziz Ansari's special at Madison Square Garden. Yeah. That swallowed him. That to me was like tinny. It was just like, this is so much bigger than you. Like,
especially something so bombastic in its presentation. It sucked the air out of it.
It sucked the air out of it. And I'm like, and he's a very high energy comic and everything. And I just felt that venue was like, I don't know, it's too intimidating. But this just felt the complete opposite.
To the occasion.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and it all sort of suited his style. Like it felt very old fashioned and bright, but there's also the darkness, like that weird sort of short film. It's almost like a Lynch film that starts the thing with that woman taking him up the elevator and all that stuff. Like it's dark but bright, and that sort of fits him too because he's got such a youthful energy, but some of his material is very dark as well. I just felt like the whole bookend of that really fit well with his sort of sensibility. And
he does he kind of reminds me of like an old like a jazz singer in the 40s. He's very like even like you can tell his influences are Seinfeld and like the people like the ones that we've all listened to, because he'll wear a suit even when he's doing Letterman or like even like a festival, he'll wear a full suit and he'll do like a proper intro of music, and he'll like start right away with it. He won't be like, how are you guys doing tonight? He just starts with a joke, and it's like you can see his influence in just not just the way it dresses, but even like you said, like the stage, like it had a very like Frank Sinatra 50s like the light changes.
Well, his comedic influences even go back further than that. I mean, he recently talked about his favorite comedy albums, and one was a Nichols and May album. And I think Nichols and May was that her first.
That was her first
album. Was their first album, but their second album is one of John Mulaney's top 10, and I found it interesting hearing him talk about that because they're very much like. They wore suits and dresses and things, and they had that formality about the comedy. And like he, to me, is sort of a caffeinated, dark-hearted vaudevillian. He's got that style. We were talking about that earlier. He's kind of got that Catskills. He reminds me of Billy Crystal a lot, but with a little bit more of a modern sensibility and energy.
That's a good comparison, I think.
Yeah, he's like he's performing.
Old-timey though, kind of.
Yeah.
Also, has that always been his cadence? Like it fits him very well. But it seems more exaggerated though.
It seems like it's refined it. Like this seems to be the ultimate expression of John Mulaney, the character of John Mulaney.
Yeah.
Because I mean he does a lot of other character work. Like you watch him in the Kroll Show and like you know, Too Much Tuna, Hello. So he does, but this is very much that. Sort of like Stephen Colbert as Stephen Colbert on the Colbert Report. I think this is to a degree maybe a bit of an exaggeration, but because it seems to progress with each special and each album.
Yes,
I think part of that has to do with like like coming from SNL as like a writer and like having this pedigree, and he clearly wanted to be a stand-up, that he jumped into like his first special. Oh, sorry, a cat just walked in, and I thought it was a ghost. I've never been so upset, then so happy, so fast in my life. I was like, oh, ghost, oh, cat.
But there hasn't been a cat in this building for 25 years.
There's a cold spot.
Ghost cat.
I feel like with his first special, it was like something that kind of proved like he needed to like he was him working his best at like trying to be this perfectly crisp comedian, telling jokes, coming out of this suit and like producing an album and producing that special. And then but like as each one comes out, he's more comfortable with the success that he has, that he's got that kind of like that thought in his head, like, okay, I've done this already. Yeah. Now I can have more fun with it. Now I can be. What really struck me
about this one was, I feel like in the first couple of specials, he talks about being a nervous, kind of sweaty person and awkward and stuff, and you believe it. But in this one, he seems like he has a new confidence.
Yes.
Like he's not ashamed in these stories. He's almost proud of them. And he really takes command of that whole place. You guys will listen to what I have to say, kind of thing, you know?
He's a little angrier in this one.
A little bit, yeah.
Well, I mean, this is a bit like not like aggressive, but like just some of the way he approaches some things. Like he's just like, what the hell?
The horse in the hospital.
Of course.
Yeah,
like,
the horse in the hospital.
But it's such a controlled performance.
Yeah, like that
was
the most, like starting with the gazebo bit.
Yeah.
Which transitions into the horse in the hospital. It's like that's the most self-controlled, angry political rant, and that just makes it that much better. Because when somebody starts yelling or getting angry, it's okay, I guess even if you're on board, you detach from it. But he just keeps the pace, so you're always laughing. But that just makes it sink in that much better.
Yeah.
And it's like. It's just completely refined his voice to the point where he can just really nail the bits.
Well, we're at an age too now where we're all yelling all the time, and now for a voice to break through, I think they have to have a calm about them. And Bill Maher and Dennis Leary are sort of, and Bill Hicks are the sort of the old style of you got to listen to me and get through. And now it's, well, I've got the microphone. I know you're going to listen to me, so I don't have to yell at you. Yeah. And it comes across much more nuanced.
It's a lot. It's like when you're at a show where like the crowd is very rowdy. Like you're at a club show or everyone's really drunk and you're like, you almost you start talking faster and you get really loud. But then what that causes, everyone else starts getting louder because they want to keep talking to drown you out. But if you just like start whispering, just start talking low, it puts everyone this like, because it's all of a sudden like they feel themselves be rude, what I mean? So it's like by being like a restrained voice of talking about something that is frustrating so many people, it makes people listen.
And it takes confidence to do that.
Oh yeah.
Because you have to believe that people will stop and listen to you. Whereas I think maybe earlier John Mulaney was like, please listen to me. Don't look at me too closely. Well, I mean that's part of the act.
Yeah,
but
I mean, to a degree, he was never on camera when he was at SNL. He was a writer, and there's a hierarchy there. Then I mean, I have a suspicion if you're camera ready, they're going to put you on camera. Like look at Leslie Jones, who she was hired as a writer, was on the show. I think he probably was that timid guy, and
maybe
it took the time to find himself. At least
he almost these days it almost seems like he writes a voice that doesn't quite suit who he is. In real life, but I think he's grown to match that voice. Like the confidence has gotten stronger or something.
Last year's JFL 42, he was one of the headliners, and he did a little, not a meet and greet, but one of the Comedy Con interview things. And he's just such a welcoming human being. Like he came out, he's just friendly. It's just you get that energy from him. Like there's some people who are like kind of tough, kind of like I saw another comedian and who I quite like, and it's just like, you're not the energy I expected off of you.
He's got a delicateness to him, and I feel like
he seems graceful.
I feel like he was raised in a house where you put things on coasters or doilies, and like I feel like he likes that.
And your father calls you a Nazi for not getting up off the bench.
But I believe he alphabetizes his records. He just seems like an organized sort of
neat.
Very neat. And he seems he's sort of stuck in time. Like we talked about, he's got that old fashioned delivery, but he also looks very boyish, but sort of
seems to have the way he talks about his personal life of a much older man.
Yeah.
And he's just this sort of anachronistic person. And
Very
that's
old
part of the
soul
charm.
Yeah.
But I also like, he has these great stories and that rhythm to his jokes. But then he'll also stop and have a little aside of like a little smirk. Like there's a little aside in there where he was talking to a friend and he said, and while they were talking, I was just waiting for my chance to talk. And that just wasn't really part of the story, but it was just this fun little comment on people in general.
He's good at that. He has a lot of that.
Succinct.
Yeah, or like throwaway lines, like well, not even throwaway, but like even one of his punchlines when he's talking about the Nazi, his dad calling him a Nazi, and then my mom said I made a salad with craisins, and then that's the end of the joke. And it's so good.
Or, and like the tossaway lines too. Like there's the bit when he's talking to JJ Bittenbinder, and he's like, he can estimate the cost of a child's coffin, and then which is funny. But what really brings it home is that once you write that, it goes in your set. Nobody laughs, but it stays in your set.
Yeah.
Like I'm butchering it, but. That just that was like an inside comedy joke.
It's not even really a joke. That's what's really interesting about that.
Punctuation.
It's making it okay that last horrible thing just happened, sort of thing.
When he's in that, I think it was New in Town where he has a line. He goes, and so I lied to them, like a liar. And it's just such a but it's like a statement of fact. Like it's not really a silly joke, but it's just like a fun point of view of what that means, of just a way to pronounce. It's like he looks at anytime he looks at a point where there's new information added to the audience, he has a comment on it, whether it be in context of the joke or a non sequitur that just somehow still works in the world that he's created. And it's just that's one of my favorite things, because that's why he's just so it's just pop, 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 pop.
That interests me so much about how he does those asides and non sequiturs. He doesn't sort of mumble them like a lot of comedians do, where it feels like a throwaway. We've said the word throwaway, but he doesn't approach them that way. He will say them, make sure you hear these asides. And it's odd, but he makes it work. He's got the confidence that this is funny.
Yeah, he's like the one story. I think this is the same story where he's like, so I was having dinner with my parents because I was at the dinner table because I was 7 and I had to be.
You're right.
Just the line,
Yeah, it just elevates that little bit of truth.
Yeah.
I just like to say did any of you ever see the JJ Bittenbinder? So it used to be on public television.
Yeah.
His videos back then. I actually, as soon as he started talking, I was like, I know who he's talking about. Like, cause it just.
Oh, yeah.
That was my first time hearing it.
Yeah, I didn't know of him, but I saw after the special came out, people were like, oh, we found footage of JJ Bittenbinder, and there was like a whole article. So
and it's a spot on impression.
Yeah, it is.
I haven't seen that.
You have to look it up. It's very.
I haven't seen that. That sounds awesome.
I grew up excited. Just growing up, I was like, I know the videos he's talking about.
Did you see them in school?
No, on PBS.
Oh, okay.
That's so cool. I want to see that.
He's a character.
Yeah. I remember when I was watching this special for the second time recently, I had to look up and see, and I saw that so Mulaney was born in August of 1982, and that's about 5 years after me. And I realized when I was watching this special that he was talking about, it seemed like my exact experience, like having people come to school and talk about how they had a hard life and like you can be a good person and all this stuff. Like Bittenbinder, I didn't have him, but people like that. And I realized a lot of even the pop culture references he was mentioning, like it felt like a part of time that hadn't been talked about a lot by some comedians. And I feel like we're now at the point where we talk about our experiences in a more personal way, but I feel like there was a gap there where we didn't. And what I realized was he was saying it in like a modern voice, like not people of, I don't want to say my generation, I'm not that far removed, but it felt like a fresher take on this material that I hadn't heard. And what I kind of realized was this guy kind of feels like my younger brother. He feels like if I was in high school, he would be the guy 5 years younger tagging along, and we're seeing this through his perspective. And it was just really interesting for me to sort of have my experience told through a younger person's lens.
Yeah.
And
it's like an unidealized nostalgia. Like he's talking about a period in time without like a lot of people are like, oh, the 80s were so awesome. They weren't. Like I was there. They weren't that great. People had a lot of terrible hair and way too much neon. But it's like
and that wasn't everybody either. In
no,
all
it
the
wasn't.
movies,
Everybody has
wearing
this epic hair and like giant hoop earrings and the like. And so,
most of us were stuck in the 70s for the entire 80s.
Yeah. So I mean, he's like everything he says is so accessible. Like even when he's going super dark, even when he's like being really, really blue in his material, it doesn't feel exclusionary. Like it feels like it's accessible. And if you may not have had that exact experience, you had something similar enough where you're like, oh, I can relate to that, and that's a real skill.
It's all very accessible. He's a great storyteller, and anybody can laugh whether they've had the experience or not.
Yeah, because I think whether or not you relate directly to like the experience of speakers coming in for a school assembly, it's like he really sets up that child adult dynamic, like the disconnect between them so well. Like just I laughed so hard and probably watched this a million times, the part where he's talking about the woman who comes in with straight gray hair, the puppets,
like cast in the denim dress.
Yes, and to me that reminded me of Sunday school and church. Like that was that woman, but it could be any, like that's, everyone had some kind of experience like that where like all the kids, like no matter like what group of kids you were in, and if you were bullied or you were the bully, the idea that like an adult who is more of a nerd than any of you and you all sort of like formed an alliance to make fun of that person is so relatable on so many levels.
That's a funny idea that maybe the school even knew that, and that they just hired losers to come to make us feel better about ourselves.
They joined forces. It's so funny to really unify them.
I remember learning something the only thing I remember about learning about how to protect yourself or self-defense or anything is that if someone tries to grab you or touch you, is to poo your pants. Because when you're terrified, apparently it turns to diarrhea.
Oh,
that's the only thing I remember.
I prefer JJ Bittenbinder's get a $50 bill and
throw it away.
Throw it in the gutter.
Well,
that's a much less.
That was much harder to come by back when I was a boy. Luckily, it never came into practice. I never had to, and I still don't know if that's true. If diarrhea happens when you're scared, I don't know.
I just love the idea of a bunch of kids hearing that advice, going, "Yeah, no, that makes complete sense."
Yourself.
Oh my God.
I think more people should try it. I think we get out of a lot of bad situations if we just.
Can I just say, when I was in elementary school, that whole bit reminded me of an assembly where we had a guy come in, and when I think about it now in retrospect and realize it was more bizarre than I was absorbing at the time, but this guy who was like really like disheveled, like dirty shirt untucked, and like really like messy looking guy, and he was talking about, I think it was like under the guise of standing up against male violence. No, but violence against men or something like that, which is a worthy cause. But when I think about it and I remember what he was saying, and he was so angry, I was like, that guy was a men's rights activist. Like, for sure. Like that's absolutely what he was. We just didn't have a name for it. And I remember him being like shouting a lot, being really angry at women. And I was like, and I remember thinking, I'm like, he seems to be talking about something that's like good inherently, but he seems contradictory. Yeah, there's something slanted there.
What vice principal was like, this guy makes a lot of sense.
The one who just had a divorce and was really not happy.
Yeah. That's exactly. He looked like a stereotypically freshly divorced, bitter guy.
Freshly divorced is my favorite two words put together in this podcast. I appreciate that you guys at least somehow learned something, because what I had, we had a guy called the three-legged policeman. And there was this, when I was in grade school, it was like grade 2 or 3, and it's funny because I only bring him up now because he was this three-legged policeman. That was the whole performance. Was he had a song and dance routine, and he was a policeman. And what he did was he had one arm down between his coat and would reveal a third leg, and he had like this dance routine. But we didn't learn anything. Like I don't remember being different after that. But then years, like 2 years ago, a year ago, my girlfriend and I were in Newfoundland, and we were like got in a cab, and we're just talking about like, well, what school did you go to? I went to Bishop's. I went to St. Augustine's. Like, oh, St. Augustine's. I was like, yeah, great school. I was like, oh, I used to work there sometimes. I go, I was a three-legged policeman, and I was like, no way. I was like, and now he's driving cabs. And I was like, man, I just and like, we didn't really follow up, but I wanted to know much more about his life.
There's so many questions.
I know. My mind is reeling. Like, I can't imagine how that could be helpul to have.
I don't know, but I like to think that
singing.
cab was shift and had 3 pedals, and he was using 3 legs to drive the entire time. But
So
he's
you
a
meant-
three-legged policeman.
So
and
he's a
then it's
cab
like,
driver who was an ex.
he was a policeman, and he would go to schools to teach stuff about like safety. But I don't remember. I remember him talking about something. But then the dance routine happened. But it was like
The dance routine, yeah.
And like everyone was like, "How'd you get that 3rd leg?" Like because we were all young. Like that was the part. Like,
why?
Of course, that's what you're gonna remember.
I don't know. It was so bizarre.
So he may have been like teaching just saying no to drugs, school
could have been
safety,
that, but, like-
who knows? But that
But all
third
that was
leg
out
just
the
blanks it
window
out.
when
Yeah.
the 3rd leg
I
came
think
out.
all I take away is look out for 3-legged policemen.
Yeah,
Like,
I didn't learn much in math, but it definitely wouldn't help if she just started juggling with a 4th arm. And I was like, yeah, my math teacher was a pretty good juggler. I was like, I don't remember what we learned though, because that stood out to me. It was so bizarre.
It's kind of sad that for a policeman to come to a school and talk to children about safety, they have to have a gimmick to get in the door.
Yeah, they can't just come up and just do the job. Like it's
Yeah.
like everyone's just like
That's not important enough.
the auditions or like the friggin' interview, and it's like, yeah, but I have a 3rd leg, and he's like, you're hired.
Yeah,
Like,
extra limbs.
it's so bizarre.
That's,
It's so bizarre. Oh man, but yeah, he does tap into like a nostalgia with a lot of his jokes. That's not direct, but he's not like, you guys remember N64? Like he does like
it's never have you ever noticed or
No.
did you experience? It's always here's my experience.
and he
laugh at
lets
it or
you
join
relate
it.
to it as
Yeah.
opposed to like pigeonholing you to be like a tapping into like cheap nostalgia, which is easy to
I
do.
find Big Mouth is kind of a lot like that as well.
Yeah.
That's like,
Yeah,
it's
the
like,
cartoon he's voicing. Yeah,
because like it's him and Nick Kroll who
Yeah,
created it.
right.
I love Big Mouth.
And yeah, like the two of them, it's just very. It's supposed to be set now, but it's timeless, and it's
Right.
More wood.
More wood.
More wood.
Yeah.
but it's timeless. But it's just like those are as gross and as inappropriate as those kids are.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I remember kids thinking. Like that kind of confused.
Sure.
It goes back to Courtney's show. I think about being like. Remember we said like you can be. It's harder to write dirty jokes because you have to be smart and clever. Like if you were to tell me that Big Mouth was a show about puberty and it was all done through dick jokes and stuff like that, I would be like, I'm not watching this. But like it's such a smart show.
smart, yeah.
It's so funny and it's so smart.
It pushes the limits too. Like it's really smart that they have adults playing the kids because they say things that we would never allow child actors to say, but they have that experience that those children can relate to.
Yeah.
which is kind of cool.
It's in the messaging is like it feels like it's gonna like on the surface it looks like this is gonna be a joke that's going one way and the actual intent and it pulls it off is the exact opposite. It's like this is kind of gross or mean or nasty, but it really does a good job of highlighting. Yes, that character is gross and mean and nasty, and you're laughing at it. It punches in the right direction.
Well, it does a good job of, I think, balancing the fact that, kids going through puberty are kind of obsessed with sexual things, but they're also innocent and sweet at the same time. And, it's not just one or the other. They can experience both. And they're still trying to figure out who they are.
Yeah, that show again. It's like John and Kroll. They tap into like that kind of nostalgia without being too heavy-handed in a way. Like especially with that show too. About thanks. Big Mouth. It's really really good.
Yeah, like Matt says, it does feel timeless. Like it feels like it could have been set during the 80s or now or whatever. Like some of those things are just universal. Like that lack of information and.
Yeah, they don't touch on they don't use social media as a tool for them to learn. Like it's all about like going through experiences through human interaction as opposed to like, watching a music video and he said this and then getting turned. Like it's all about like how kids and even the adults sometimes in the show, like you see how they react to each other, that it's just universal. Like everyone's going to go through that no matter what time period you're in.
Man, this reminds me of another thing when I was in grade school. There was a video that was brought in that was supposed to teach us everything we need to know about sex. And I wasn't allowed to watch it because I guess they thought I couldn't handle it. This is probably like
who?
The teachers at the school, I guess. It was like a film strip we were supposed to watch. So I was in grade 5 or 6. So I was like 10 or 11, I guess. And I was like in a small group of kids who had to like go sit in another room and not watch it because they didn't think we could handle it. And I remember when people came out, they were saying it was like cartoon rabbits and stuff, and like there was a song, "A penis is the right word, not wiener or dink" or something like that. Like it was like, like just the funniest thing. Like it was just so goofy. And
I love
I'm
when they
still
try
sad
and
I
make
missed
those.
it.
I love when they try and make those things actually silly, and it just takes you right out of it. Whereas like Big Mouth, you get the Shame Wizard, which sounds stupid on paper, but I'm like, oh god, this is too real right now. And then you start going Winky Dinky Rabbits. I'm like, I'm good. I'm just gonna let my mom bring a book to me and walk away. Like,
do you guys remember learning anything?
I was literally
in school.
Oh, not
or was it not really?
School, I don't.
Any of you guys I was in public school. Were any of you guys in?
public
I was
school.
in public elementary school. Yeah.
I went to Catholic school first. I was in Catholic school from kindergarten to grade 3 or 4, and then that was when the building, like, they stopped becoming a Catholic school and then they changed to public. So the building stayed the same, but then they just like, I remember we were just so excited that we didn't have to wear a uniform anymore. Like, it was always a white shirt and black pants, which was insane because we were kids, and we are literally covered in stuff all the time. Like, it's just coming home with chocolate milk stains and chip. Like, it was just so stupid. Then when I wore a Pokemon shirt for the first time at school, I lost my mind. Like, it was just the best.
So was your chapel converted to like a cafeteria with just
no, they still got the church there, but it was just like, but it did change. But I don't remember. It's so funny. Like, for me, I don't feel like I remember any class or anything like that. But I did come home one day, like in high school, I think junior high or whatever, the 12 or 13 years old, and I just came home and there was just a book on my bed about it all.
That was my experience.
Yeah,
and then my dad at one point drifted into the room and was like, "So, do you have anything to talk about?" And I'm like, "No."
Yeah.
And go away. And he's like, "Cool, I'm done."
So I grew up like my mom raised me and my sister by herself, and I had like, so my dad, my grandfathers all passed away when I was young, so it was just like a lot of aunts, a lot of grandmothers, a lot of two sisters, and a bunch of cousins that were women that like, I think they were just looked at like, what are we gonna, Ryan is I don't know, just a book. And then I just came home to his book, and it was just, and I just went, yep, that makes sense, and I picked it up and read it, and I was like, that's what I got it all from.
No eye contact needed.
No eye contact needed. Stared at the wall in the book.
What about you, Courtney? Do you remember?
We had like a health class that I vaguely remember going through, like basic anatomy type stuff and like definitions of very clinical things for like in junior high. My parents never ever talked about it ever. We just did not. We were my family is very religious, and so they were like, well, you'll learn about it at school and church.
When it's too late, you'll learn about it.
I mean, we weren't supposed to like they were like pro abstinence and stuff like that, like pro life, pro abstinence and all that stuff. So it was like, you don't talk about that stuff. So I had to, my friends had big mouths and were able to tell me a lot of stuff. And then
now I get where the name of the show comes from.
There you go.
There it is.
That's why when I watch that show, it feels like oh, I wish that. I mean, I don't assume children watch that show, but on some level, it's almost like it's such good sex ed, though.
But think about it. If you watched, I was 13, 12 watching South Park when I clearly shouldn't have. So it being on Netflix, I'm sure.
Oh yeah,
I'm sure it almost helps that it's an animated show, that there are going to be kids that there probably are going to be kids that watch that and are going to be better because of it.
I think so, because it's just
we're trying to kill their friend Kenny every week.
It's funny and smart and like just so real. And I just like when I watch it, I'm like, oh, I wish I had something of this like kind of resource when I was younger, because I didn't. And I went to Catholic high school and they didn't talk about stuff like that either.
Right.
So
No.
Catholic. Where'd you go to high?
Waterloo.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Mm-hmm.
I had a similar experience to you boys. I wasn't given a book, but I found a book in the bathroom one day in the cupboard called "Talking to Your Children About Sex."
That's better than the books of my father said I found in the bathroom.
Well, that's another show. So I read that book cover to cover. It was like, if your child asks this question, here's the answer. And that's how I learned. I was the adult and the child in the scenario, so it's very
That's
odd.
so funny.
Yeah. My parents had that. Remember that 1970s Joy of Sex? Like with
there's joy sex,
with
everything you always want to know about sex, but we're afraid to
and
ask.
They just left it out, and I'm like, I'm a kid. I'm gonna look, and I'm like, scarred for life.
I felt like most of my experience was like the book. Obviously, I did read it, but like a lot of it was also kind of like Big Mouth, where like you and your friends talked about it, and like you kind of like learn through them and like their experiences, like just talking about it and be like, so I got hair here, and then you're like, what? And like there was a lot of that for me growing up, because like again, I didn't have a proper talk, but it was a lot like the kids in that show. Like that's, you really learn a lot from just other people experience and just hive mind. I was just like, they mistake what you got, and like, oh, that's
it just
what
merges into
it. You just reminded me, I totally forgot about it. This one guy, Chris, in grade 5, I was sitting with my friend Jody and him, and he said one day out of the blue, just smiling, I have a pubic hair. And then like, just to best him, I was like, I have 7. And then Jody's like, wait, you sit there on the toilet like 1, 2.
That's so funny. Yeah, there was only 2 approaches to 2, was either shame or confidence.
Totally.
Because it was like, some people would be like, they would like, as a kid, I remember there was some people that like would brag about things like that.
Yeah.
And then they were like, I don't want anyone to know about my one pube. Like it was just like, yeah.
And with Mulaney too, like it's, you know, you come from a religious family, you went to Catholic school for it. It's interesting because he brings his upbringing into his material so much that, you know, his Catholic heritage, and it's like, my wife, who she went to Catholic school all the way through, and she loves his jokes, and she has a very sort of similar sense of humor, where it's like, I'm curious how much that Catholic upbringing informed his humor, where it's like, where there's a rebelliousness to it, but it's
still a politeness.
Still polite. There's still that Catholic guilt. That's sort of built into it from.
And he acknowledges it, like with the reference to, like, you know, I make fun of it a lot, but whenever I hear Bill Maher say, who's going to believe in the man in the sky? He's like, my mommy.
Yeah, it's true. It's that interesting thing where like geeks are like that too. Or you were talking about something similar to that about being a goth.
Yeah.
How you can make fun of something that is your own, but if someone else makes fun of it, you defend it.
It's defensive. Yeah,
you got to draw from your own experiences, because that's not his style. It's to make fun of necessarily other people. It's always detriment to him. He's always self-deprecates without it being too like heavy-handed about it. He's not like, I'm so ugly. Like it's more clever than that.
But like again, the horse in the hospital. Even when he's angry at somebody, in that case, it's Trump. It's like, it's never that tangerine monster, or it's never something like even.
He also never says his name. I believe he doesn't say his name once. Which adds so much strength, because there is strength in Trump's name. As soon as you say it, it's like,
we'll edit that out.
But like, just by not saying his name, because that's just what he likes. He likes when people talk about
him power.
It does give him power, and it's such a funny joke, because it's like by not saying his name is the biggest fuck you, because it's like, you know, if someone showed him that clip, like, this guy made fun of you, and he's like so sensitive, he needs to watch it. But the fact that like it probably confused him.
He wouldn't have got that.
Am I the horse of the hospital?
Am I the horse of the hospital?
My hooves are the nicest horse.
When does the king come in? I assume I'm the king.
Yeah, but I thought that was my favorite part of the joke, is that we never hear his name once, but it's just we know.
Yeah.
And if you can connect with your audience and like tell, like, make them think what you want to think, and it makes you feel it makes you feel smart listening to the joke.
True.
It does. He's really good at making you feel, without pandering, like making you feel like we're on the same page.
In on something.
Yeah. We're all in it's like we're in a little club about this conversation and topic.
Well, he also clearly references
I love that joke so much.
Obama, but doesn't say his name, but he just says the last guy was pretty smart and was good at his job.
Yeah.
Like, that's him.
Yeah.
We know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he lets you make the click in your head.
Yeah.
And that's my favorite thing, when you write a good joke that makes the audience do that eye widening, like, I know exactly what you're talking about, and make them like that synapse that happens. That's like one of my favorite little connections. It takes guts as a comedian
to give your audience that much credit, like to not spell it out for them, because the biggest fear is that they don't get it, right? And I think a lot of comedians underestimate their audience, and it's much more fun. I used to do sketch comedy, and like we always said, if we get one laugh, this stupid math joke is worth putting in. We weren't trying to appeal to absolutely everyone for every single joke. I mean, that's great when you feel that, but sometimes it's okay to tell a joke that's only for a few people.
Yeah.
And then we're often surprised by how many people do laugh at that thing that you think no one will laugh at.
Yeah, it's like probably one of my favorite jokes of all time.
It's really good. It's a great analogy. And like you said, Courtney, no word wasted. It's just such a beautiful metaphor and story. He says exactly what he wants to say. I remember thinking, I can't remember now, I feel like after that, the show ends on a bit of a low note. It doesn't end on a huge joke. I can't remember now.
Well, he gets this Petunia and that turkey bit with Petunia. Where his
that was such a huge bit, and then he ended on being in church and his dad lifting him up and saying, "God can't hear you." It does seem like a low note. It still works.
Yeah, it's fine, but it's not
like
the
climax of the.
Well, it's like in Newtown where he talks about the doctor, and he's like, and he was wearing glasses to show that time has passed, and that's what he ended on. Yeah. And I think a lot of it is like, because I've noticed that some of his bits do not end on the big. Sometimes it's like any showcase set, you want to end on the biggest laugh, so that you're walking on a high note. But he kind of ends on organic notes to the story. Yeah. Like it's not necessarily the funniest part; it's the part that goes. That this is the only way this was going to go here, and it wraps everything up in a beautiful way. That's not necessarily funny, but you're like, I get, like, it makes sense.
I was recently talking to Mateo Lane about just we were chatting about comedy for the show. Name drop, yeah. But we talked about what his favorite album was, and it's Ellen DeGeneres Is Here Now.
Oh, interesting.
So I'd watched that because I used to watch her when she was like making her up and coming comic, and when she was on the Ellen show when I was in like university. But then I sort of like I didn't really watch her special because it's sort of like after the sitcom I was like, I'm done. I know what she's gonna do, and I was watching it. I was like, wow, this is really an amazing joke. Like she's amazing. Like I'm like, okay, this reminds me why she's such an amazing comedian and why she's so good. Because it's like that. She sets stuff up in the first couple of minutes of her set, and then like an hour later pays it off, and it all feels organic. Mm-hmm. And John Mulaney's a lot like that, where nothing feels forced, and there's an economy in his comedy.
Sorry, I just thought of not funny.
Not funny. But there's an economy there, but it feels natural. It feels like you're engaged in having conversation, or it doesn't feel like, okay, this is a guy who's spent where he has obviously spent time working on and refining and finding that perfect
callbacks, especially, man. Like a good organic, beautiful callback is so hard to do. Like to not wait too long, but to wait long enough, and it comes out of something else, but organically refers to the thing before. Like
perfect one, the genius one with the Victorian robe, where he's
that's
masterful.
That's so good.
You forgot about that. That was the first joke in the whole special, and then later, and that joke wasn't even about that story in any way. And then all of a sudden he's just wearing this oversized shirt and like, was there ever really a ghost, or was it just me? That's so crazy that he even tied that together.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say it's a little longer, I think, than a lot of people would wait for something like that. He trusted that they remembered, and it killed.
I think there's like an exact math equation to how long ago the callback's made to how specifically this callback attaches to this joke. It's definitely just this math equation that's just like you just attach that to a thing, like gonna get a big laugh, like it's perfect.
But everything in between has to work too. Like it's all a momentum,
especially because that joke didn't even need that callback. It wasn't written for it. It just worked so perfectly.
It was like it's almost like he had two halves of a story and just decided to split it up, and it just divides perfectly in two acts or something.
In two different ways. Yeah. So amazing.
Do you ever write a joke and like you find something funny that you retroactively write something to call back to? Like, do you ever do that?
What do you mean?
So like for example, like you say something on your set, maybe you write later, and then like, oh, I'll call back to this. But have you ever written something and then like plant a seed earlier retroactively to make a callback happen? You ever done anything like that?
I don't know if I have. I'm not sure if I can think of a time that I've done that. Have you?
Yeah,
do you do that?
I've done that. Like, and it's like just to like, but you know what sucks? Every time I do that, it doesn't really work because I've just been like, this is really funny. Maybe if I drop something here, and then like, but then like, it's like you can hear the shoehorn thing from earlier, which I've come to learn because it's like, I don't know a specific example, but like I have this joke about where I say I grew up without a dad, and like with Father's Day cards, it's so awkward, and the big laugh is like, and I set up that basically I say earlier in the set that I always failed at them because I always couldn't color, I kept spelling father wrong, and like I was and so I drop stuff like that. And then later I say, you know, my uncle will get 2 Father's Day cards every year. Card number 1, dear dad, your best dad in the world, Steven. Card number 2, hey Derek, keep the good work. Steven's a good kid. P.S. I miss my foother. So the foother, thing, but that joke always ended with father. And then it just was whatever. But then I was like, and then I thought about I was like, but then there wasn't anything about how I was bad at cards. So then I added that to get to dropping earlier that I'm bad at spelling father. But if you listen to that, I don't do that joke as much anymore because like the father thing, that didn't get a laugh. So I'm not calling back to something that's laugh. It's just calling back to information. Right. So it's like putting information in. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is,
did it work or not? So it didn't work. So you're not getting a daytime Emmy for this?
No, not for this. Okay. But
sorry to hear.
No, it worked out. It does have a laugh now because I've edited it before. But it's like, but it does like that's the thing about like that's why I love John Mulaney so much because it's so crisp. It makes you want to be a better writer.
It's well crafted.
I would love to just watch his process, like how he builds his material, because you look at the stuff that he's responsible for on SNL, like Stefan,
right?
That's almost like an inside joke between him and Bill Hader of their own kind of like aristocrat situation, where it's like every week he would just change up the material, right before it goes, and Bill wouldn't know until
that's why he was crack sometimes because he would write new cue card jokes without telling him, and then he'd just come up. That's why he did those pauses. Yeah, he was reading the cue card, going, "Oh my god!"
and it's like I want to know his process. I want to watch how he builds his material because it's so finely crafted. It's just really interesting.
Did you see the SNL he hosted last year?
Yes.
Do you remember the sketch with the lobster dinner?
Yeah, the thing they basically let him do sketches that he wrote that they
rejected because he has the power now to do it.
So
but it's funny watching a sketch like that and even thinking about the jokes he wrote for Stefan, because when you watch his stand-up, like it's fairly clean, but like he does talk about some darker stuff and some like also other gross stuff, but like he has a style within himself. Yeah. Whereas like I'll watch a sketch that say he wrote and I'm like, he wrote that? Because it's just like there's definitely a weird little dark part in his head that's every now and then he's like, I'm gonna call Kroll. Like, that's why he has Kroll as his friend. So he has that little like avenue to explore that part of his mind.
Speaking of Kroll, I'd love to segue now into getting your thoughts on Oh Hello. Have you guys all seen that?
I have not.
I unfortunately have not. No. It's one of those things that's always on my list, and it's because I like to watch comedy like with a couple of people. Like I like watching stand up by myself, but at the same time, like if I know my girlfriend's gonna be home, I'd like to watch it because I feel like it's fun, more fun to laugh with a bunch of people. Yeah. Like if you watch an episode of The Simpsons by yourself, you're gonna be quiet. But if you watch it with 3 people, even if it's an old, you'll notice that people will laugh together. Yeah. So I don't want. But Oh Hello's on my list, but because it's not like a traditional stand-up show, it's a little harder to pitch to my friends who either aren't comedians or people have already. All my comedian friends have friggin' seen it, so it's like
I've started and stopped it a few times. I can't get through. It's not for me. I can't stand it.
Conversely, I love it.
Really?
Yeah,
I love it.
A lot of people love it. A lot of fans. I'm not a huge Nick Kroll fan, to be honest.
Okay.
Probably cut that part out. But I love Mulaney, and I like some stuff Kroll does. But yeah, these characters they play for like 90 minutes, it's just, I find it insufferable.
It's very much a love letter to a very specific subset of New Yorkers.
Yeah.
It's the comedy and the setup, and like there's inside Broadway jokes, not even just like inside New York.
Yeah, I mean,
specific to Broadway.
I think it deserved a sketch, but that's it. I get what they're doing. Maybe even a callback. Maybe they could do a recurring sketch. They could do it twice, 5-10 minutes tops. But man, I don't know. We'll have to do a recap another time.
It's so crazy that some people love things. Some people hate.
I know.
Well, it's like you're saying though. Like you're saying, you're surprised at some of the stuff he wrote, and I feel like almost everything that Mulaney's attached to, I enjoy, except this one thing.
Yeah,
right.
I just can't get into it all.
Well, it's like, it's so funny now we go back to what we like and do and hate about someone's career. I love John Mulaney, but I tried watching one episode of Mulaney.
Oh, yes.
With Martin Short as his father, like the Fox show. Did you see any of it?
Yeah.
It is
Did it
tough.
make it past?
No, it got canceled. One season.
It's a very
my wife loved it. She loves Martin Short. She loves Mulaney Short.
I love Martin
Short. Who can't?
But this is the kind of sitcom they almost don't make anymore.
Yeah, it was a very old-fashioned sitcom. And like the entire cast, every single person in there on that show on their own is somebody whose work I enjoyed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a lot, like when you heard the announcement, especially consider that like Seinfeld's clearly a huge influence on him.
Oh, yeah.
So the idea of having his own
pedigree
sitcom
is
based on
huge.
his life with his, like, notice how Mulaney, the name of the show is his last name, right?
Yeah.
Which is like Seinfeld.
Oh,
and it's
yeah.
all about like his growing being like a comedian. Like it's very much his love letter to the shows he watched growing up that he wanted to do, but it just didn't translate well.
No.
Even some of the scenes, like I think in the pilot they do the joke, remember where like the doctor getting the finger in him and he's like, oh, like he saw that as a thing in TV, and I remember going, oh no, this is a stand-up joke. Like it just didn't translate.
Right. No.
And it's so weird because like you said, there was so many people going onto that show. I was jumping and I was so stoked when I saw the pilot and I was like,
Yeah.
woof. At comedy, I argue that you do got to let it breathe. Like if you watch the first season of Parks and Rec, it's not that great. It's not that. It's a little actually tough to watch. But once they know the characters and grow, and they find the group. But Mulaney was,
And it tanked.
it tanks. It was tough. It was tough. I didn't get past the second episode.
But it seems like he was hip to that very early on, right? Like he was just like, oh, this flopped.
Yeah.
Which is like unfortunate, but also cool that he like bounced back from that.
Yeah, some people
in
don't
such
bounce
a
back from
monumental
that.
way. Yeah.
Well, I think that may be his time as a writer at SNL because you either learn to deal with rejection fast, or you don't last in that writer's room.
Yeah.
And
He's also not a jerk that went around blaming everybody else for the
Yeah,
show.
he owned it.
He owned it. Was like, this show's bad.
That
And
goes a
then
long
kept
way
going.
in this business.
Oh my God, yeah.
Accountability
Oh my
is
God,
huge.
Yeah.
yeah.
I think that's when after that got canceled. Correct me if I might be wrong on this, but then his second special came out. So I think he just wasn't he just doesn't seem the kind of guy, again, by handling rejection, that he just immediately puts his nose to the ground to start working on the next thing, as opposed to wallowing in self pity about woe is me, my show got canceled.
And I just don't know if his personality is the type of guy that fits a standard sitcom. I mean, these days I feel like we really TV gravitates to that very edgy characters that we're still sort of riding that mid-90s edgy comedy kind of thing, and now these days it starts to be turning around where people who are actually pleasant on stage and people that you'd want to have a coffee with are now telling jokes and things like that, but they don't always work into the modern television landscape as it is now, I guess.
Like with John Mulaney, so there's back in like the 90s, there was sort of like this almost revival of the wall of sound kind of music. So you had bands like Cinerama or the Divine Comedy, where it's had that sort of like big bombastic horn driven vintage music kind of thing. And John Mulaney's kind of like that for comedy, and in a way I kind of feel like maybe, I don't know if maybe there are more voices like that, where it's like going back to like classic style of telling jokes, like being a comedian and getting up on stage and telling jokes. And there's nothing wrong with it. Like every type of comedy has its value. I like it all, but I kind of find like there's it's interesting how he seems to be hearkening back to a golden age of comedy in a way, after especially in the midst of this big boom that seems to be sort of like at its peak with like the alt scene.
We've had 20 years of people just walking up on the stage in t-shirts, like they just sort of came off the street and go, okay, here's my stream of consciousness. But this guy's like, no, I am a professional presenter and I've worked on this stuff and it's going to be good. And it shows and it's fun.
Yeah. I like what you said about that because one thing I always liked about John Mulaney is that like I'm really bad at comparing myself to other people, which I know you're not supposed to do, but we all do it. And especially when I'm watching like I'll see a friend kill at Comedy Bar or at Yucks who's like very alt, and I say to myself, man, should I start doing stuff like that? Like I get the bad habit of doing that all the time, but it's like, but then you like go and do a set and have fun and you just be yourself and you do a good set. Like you just got to lean into who you are. Yeah. And it's like, and that's what I think I love about John Mulaney is that he's not really that special. Like he's not like him as a person. Like there's nothing crazy different. He grew up Catholic, and clearly there was some oppressed things that he couldn't speak about. But he's just like, when you look at a guy or any person, like it feels like now comedy has to be like, sometimes to me, especially with alt, you have to be either super, super weird or like have such a niche point of view. But like he's just talking in a way about himself that's just so relatable that like sometimes people think if you're so relatable, it's hacky. But it's like at the end of the day, it's just funny. And if you're just smart and clever, that's good. So like I find him very inspiring to be like, it reminds me just be myself and lean into that because it can be so hard to try what other people are doing.
But it's also polished.
It's so polished
in a way that I think a lot of comedians who just want to be themselves aren't. You know, they don't have that. The presentation, and I feel like that's just who he is. He's well spoken and chooses his words carefully.
And he makes a lot of us sort of like divide our comedic persona into like I'm a writer learning to have more of a stage presence, or I'm like a performer. Like we know a lot of people who are like they're such performers that it doesn't even matter what they say sometimes. It's like they've got such energy and they're telling jokes and you're like, you're making this work. And if you had this on paper, it's not even that profound or anything, but you're making it work. And so I think he's like found the perfect balance of like writerly, but also he's found that persona that works on stage for him. And it's just really polished.
It's interesting to see comedians. I mean, I don't know his trajectory before Saturday Night Live. I assume he was also a stand-up, but it's interesting to see people succeed as writers and then become like Conan O'Brien. Like to me is the most amazing example. Like, you know, he did a couple of cameos in Saturday Night Live, but he was a writer, and then to be given that show and then have that weird comedic voice and presence is that
article he wrote, the one about the albums he loved.
John O'Brien?
No, John
Mulaney.
Yeah. I read that too. Yeah. And there was one album, I can't remember which one, but he said that was the one that made him want to be a stand-up. And he said he was like 21 or 22 at the time. And I was like, because it's so funny, because I feel like, especially like how long I've been doing it and friends of I've been doing it, like that's kind of when I started too. But I see so many people who are like so successful that are so young that sometimes you're like, but that young person started when they're like 16, 15. So everyone puts their time in, which is really interesting to me because it's like sometimes you got to think perspective of everything. Because he was in school and then he started. At the end of his school, he started to become a comedian. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
I thought that was
really cool. You want to hear something so infuriating that I read about him? This is like endearing and infuriating at the same time. I read an article, I think it was in Vulture. It was like a debriefing of that podcast that he did called The Good Ones or whatever, where he's breaking down his favorite joke, his own favorite joke and why it works and stuff like that. And they asked him, like, what's the worst you've ever bombed? And his story of the worst he ever bombed was he did this gig where he was doing all his best jokes and people were just like not responding to it. And he's like, I don't know what's going on. Like people don't like me. And he got really dejected. And then the guy who he was touring with pulled him aside and was literally like, John, like you're too clever for these people. You need to dumb it down a little bit. Like they just don't get you. Like you're on another level. Like you got to bring it to be less. I think like the main advice was like, you need to be less tangential and like long-winded and like less wordy and stuff, but like ultimately it seemed like he was saying you're too much of a genius for anyone on this planet to comprehend. You need to come down to
like, John. I
read that. I was like, okay, that's the worst you've ever bombed. All right, well,
that's funny.
He kind of reminds me in a way a lot of Jim Gaffigan, and they'd be
really
just bear with me in that you know he defies expectations in a lot of ways, like as. And with Jim Gaffigan, it was like watching his TV show, which John Mulaney was on, just like randomly bump into each other on the street in New York. And there was kind of a rivalry between them. But they both are, you know, they both have a similar upbringing. They both have, it's the more the counterpoint of two people from a similar starting point ending in very different locations. And, you know, Jim Gaffigan, when his material is, again, squeaky clean. It never on stage he never like strays from that, but off stage and in other like his TV shows, like that went places that I would never have expected it to go, and it sort of shows a depth there, and so that's where I find like there's a parallel in a way.
It's interesting to think of, you know, how comedians find success by sort of through a narrow focus in their voice, but they actually have a much broader voice, and they want to do different things and darker things. But do you guys feel like you have to narrow your field to be successful, like to do sort of one thing? Do you feel like you have a style or a persona that is specific?
Court, you want to take it on first?
I don't feel that I have to, but I feel like I've spent a large chunk of my career trying to find what works for me best. I definitely know now what makes me feel like I'm being the most authentic on stage. And I'm only in the last year realizing that it's when I'm like cheerfully angry, like when, like kind of ranty a little bit and just get like saying things that get me riled up and like kind of yelling, but in a way that's not actually mad. That works a lot for me. But I don't feel like pigeonholed into or obligated to find. I'm sure some people do though. I don't know. What about you?
I kind of like, I'm kind of similar, like I think we've been doing almost the same amount of time. Yeah. And it's just like,
you guys been doing the comedy?
I'm 28 now and I started really doing stand up when I was like 22. Yeah. And it's just like, I feel like same thing, just constantly trying to figure out what works for me still. Like I'm still only a baby, but like there's times where I've recently noticed sometimes when I'm nervous, there's a voice I'll go to that's almost kind of like silly childlike that I'll go for it just crushed a few times at a few things. So I'm like, that's almost like but it started to become a crutch. Like I would go to that if I felt like it wasn't going to work. And I've been trying to get out of that because like it's just doesn't, like people have seen me live. It's like I've never seen you perform like that before. It's different. But then we had our showcases last night for all the fests, and like I'll be honest, I didn't have the best showcase fest I've ever had. It was definitely not one of my better ones, but like I listened to it because I recorded my phone, and it was because I was nervous and I went into that kind of whatever voice, and I felt so dumb because I was like, why don't I just go do what I usually do? And then the other night I did Comedy Bar, someone's show. I don't know what it was 2 nights ago, and I did the exact same set, but I just went up. I had like a half a glass of wine in me on an empty stomach. I was like, I'm just gonna have fun, and I just was myself, and the set went really well. But it was the exact same set, and I was like, this should have been my showcase set. Why didn't I just do my thing and just go and just be myself?
Well, that's the hardest thing about an artist, right? Like you want to do well, but you also get bored.
But I think a lot of it had to do with the showcase aspect because it was just like, this is so much pressure that I need to do well.
The feeling and the delivery of it, you know? Because if you're doing the exact same set, and you obviously chose that as your showcase set because it has been working. So there's nothing wrong with that. But you get into certain mindsets, and sometimes you try to like pull yourself out of it. Sometimes it's just too late, and that's okay. But like you definitely know the difference. You're like, oh, I can deliver this in a way that works.
And it was just like a learning thing to be like, just like next year, I just know like don't panic. Just like your material. I've been working on. I've been doing that stuff for friggin' 3 months, and it's just like I know it works. And then I just panicked and like anyway. So
also I and other people have gotten into big things based on showcase sets that I felt were not great.
So you never know. And again, like, and it's like in most things, if I get something that's great, if I don't, hey man, it's next year. It's not the end of the world, right?
Exactly.
But anyway, so back to like narrowing your voice to whatever to try and fit what you think your stand-up is. I think it's always changing and evolving, but I think it's not about finding your voice, but learning to just trust yourself.
Yes.
Because once you start trusting yourself, I feel like that's when you do your best, when you just go, I know this is gonna, it's like a confidence thing that you just earned.
Yeah,
it's
because
confidence you've earned.
Because the huge distinction is it's not choosing your voice, because you can choose whatever you want. If you're not actually feeling it, that's not your voice. Like I think it's just your voice is you are actually feeling fun and happy and happy to be here, calm in the moment, and then whatever is flowing out of you, that's just what you're going with. And then that's,
it's an extension of you.
Yeah. Or whatever that you is. Right. Because some people like, you look at someone like Nick Nemiroff and like that's definitely him on stage, but like he's not like that necessarily in person, but like that's his voice. And same with anybody who's got more of an alt thing. Bobcat Goldthwait, like I mean, like I've seen him in interviews, he's definitely a little bit like that on stage. But when he's on stage being like, like it's like,
well, that's a character.
It's a character, but he learned that that's a character he wants to be, and he trusts
it's him filtered through that.
Whereas like when I put on that I was just like a panic moment. So it's like just learning to trust yourself. And I think once you have 100% truth to yourself, and that's from years of experience, bombing, writing, knowing works. And then once you that's when people say, what, did you find your voice? I think that's just a way of saying like, do you trust yourself now?
Right. Are you finally comfortable with who you are?
On stage.
For sure.
That's why you go up as much time as you can.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, we're about ready to wrap up here, but I want to ask you guys, like, who do you feel is sort of a contemporary of John Mulaney? Is there someone that you feel he is similar to? I mean, we talked about how he collaborates with Nick
Who's
Kroll,
younger now coming up?
Not necessarily. Maybe someone he, harkens back to, or...
I feel like Seinfeld a lot. Cuts
Seinfeld.
back to me with
he's
him.
sort of his hero, right?
Yeah, Seinfeld. I think a lot of the Rat Pack kind of vibe he gives off. Like I think it's that clean. I think he just loves well structured jokes. Because if you look at the structure of some of his jokes, like none of them are breaking the mold. Like it's like it's a lot of like this is like this, and an example of this, which is just joke structure 101.
And so easy to understand.
Yeah. So I think it's like Seinfeld would be the biggest one.
I think I would say so too.
Yeah.
Cool. And do you see him affecting a change at all in the way comedy is being delivered now?
I would say that he's almost just like modernized, like what you said, like he's very conventional in his joke writing, and sometimes like right now it feels almost like that's being phased out a little bit. Like even on late night they're starting to introduce more quirky offbeat characters, but he maintains it in a way that's still relatable. So I think he's good at upholding tradition in a way that he's still modernizing it, he's still making it relatable to this generation, but it's still very set up punchline jokey, very clean cut.
Because you get a lot of like just today, I feel like, especially with like I feel like there's like eras where a lot of younger comedians are trying to emulate the top comic at the time. Yeah. So like when I was 22, 23, I remember Dane Cook was really big. So a lot of people were like bro-y, kind of yelly. And then like when Louis C.K. was like self-deprecating, I'm gross and piece of shit, right? And it's like, so like in terms of like
truer for some than others.
Yeah. But I feel like we're just coming out of that whole self-deprecating to the extent that we're gross. That it's like I like the idea that he brings forward that like, because John self-deprecates too, but it's clever and it's smart and it's joke writing. Because you get a lot of like, especially the open mics, you get a lot of like, I'm a piece of shit, and I'm like, but why? And like, shut up. And then like, that's the end of the joke. And I'm like, that wasn't a joke.
Like you actually hate yourself.
I know. Yeah.
And I think that works too when there's a different climate in the world. Like with what's happening in the States right now, I think people really want to. It's a cliche, but laugh again and laugh at fun stuff and stuff that isn't necessarily political humor and rants and how horrible a person is. Like bring some sunshine to the stage. That's okay.
Yeah, it just shows like just how like just sitting down and doing it, putting the pen to the paper, the keyboard, and just writing and just working at it and just focusing on it just shows that like that hard work's not going to go out of style. Yeah, that's what he's showing. Yeah. Hard work's not going to go out of style. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
and I as someone who considers myself a very written comic, I appreciate that. I'm like, oh, there's an example of someone who's just putting the work in, writing jokes in a traditional way that's still working. That's good enough for me to be like, oh, I'm doing something right. I don't need to go outside of my bubble to like be weird or crazy if that's not what I'm feeling. Because
I would to compliment what you said there, like I would say I'm more of a performer. So when I watch John, it inspires me to be like a better writer.
Oh, nice.
It makes me go, I need to be a better writer, and that makes me like set 2 hours today to write. It makes me go, I'm gonna like John Moslin. I meet up with him all the time, and we just like take a look at our jokes and just I know that I need that to bring me to that next level. So it's like that's what I like about him a lot.
My thanks to my guests, Courtney Gilmore. She's on Twitter at Court Gilmore, COURTGILMOUR. You can see her in her monthly show, So Fresh and So Clean at Comedy Bar, and you can hear more from Courtney in our upcoming one-on-one interview with her. Ryan Dillon can be found on Twitter at The Ryan Dillon, TheRyanDillon, and his brand new stand-up comedy album, Violently Nice, is available now. Thanks again to my co-producer, Matthew Ardill. You can find him on Twitter at The Common Person. And be sure to check out our ongoing collection of interviews and check back soon for our next episode when my guest will be Kat Letwin. We'll be discussing the Maria Bamford album, How to Win. Until next time, this is Jason DeLine. Thanks for listening to Comedy Album Book Club.
You know how to book flights and hotels. All you're missing is a tool to plan the travel experiences you'll have once you arrive. That's why you need Viator. Book guided tours, activities, excursions, and more in one place to make your trip truly unforgettable. Viator has over 300,000 travel experiences to choose from. Everything from simple tours to extreme adventures and all the niche, interesting stuff in between. So you can plan something that everyone you're traveling with will enjoy. Real traveler reviews give the inside scoop from people who've already been on the experiences you're considering. So you can plan with confidence. Free cancellation helps you plan for the unexpected. And 24/7 customer support means you can travel worry-free. Download the Viator app now and use code Viator10 for 10% off your first booking in the app. Find travel experiences for you. Do more with Viator.
Swimsuit? Check. Sunscreen? Check. Phone charger? Check. Don't forget to pack the 5-Hour Energy. It fits great in a pocket or carry-on, and the alert feeling will help you arrive ready for anything. Now get 20% off when you use code 5HETRAVEL at 5hourenergy.com. Expires April 30th. One-time use only. Not valid with other discounts. Remember, visit 5hourenergy.com and use code 5HETRAVEL to save 20%.